In our classes the last few days, we were directed to Testimonies to the Church, Volume 1, page 300. And we went there because Ellen White speaks about the work of the third angel. And it's in these three parts: Sabbath, the nature of man, and the testimony of Jesus. And we began to explain how the issue with the church was the rejection of these last two parts of the third angel's message, that they accepted the Sabbath but not the later two parts, the other two. And because of that issue, the message became broken or corrupted. Now, what I mean by that is that it became a legalistic religion or a legalistic doctrine. So we've addressed all of that. Jones and Wagner come to correct that mistake, and they end up empowering the third angel's message. So we've addressed that issue. And the reason why we're looking at this is because we discussed in the book of Deuteronomy, is it good advice or is it law? And in the English, it seems really straightforward if something was good advice or if it's a legal issue. When we start coming to these doctrinal concerns or our religious walk, the distinction between the two is not that straightforward to deal with, because people struggle with the concept of things just being good advice without having repercussions. So we did a short review of the nature of man. So people have been drawing on the board. That wasn't my work. And what we did was a quick review of the existing studies in the movement that address this subject. 2 years ago, a major series was done called The Nature of Man. It's about 60, 65 presentations, that kind of number. And it dealt with the subject at hand. Now, people think that that subject was finished and they received a great blessing from that. But at the time, if you go back and review it, what people missed, and it was brought up, was the fact that this was only half the study. This was half the study on the subject of the nature of a human being. And what was being addressed was this half here, which I've called Glory 1, or symbolic resurrection, or the baptism of a person, or the renewal of the heart. And our key passage, we didn't actually read it, but the one that I directed you to was Romans chapter 6. And what I'm saying is that's half the study that you need to do if you're going to tackle this issue. The other half is this one here, and our key passage was 1 Corinthians chapter 15. I just gave you the chapter because I wanted us to see the context. Again, I didn't read the chapter. It's a long chapter, and there's so many things that are in there that are of importance to us. But the point that I wanted us to see was this is what I've called here Glory 2, and it's called the literal resurrection. And it's the physical resurrection, the second advent of the human shell or the human body. And it's understanding both parts of the resurrection. The Bible speaks about from glory to glory. It speaks about the threefold nature of a human being, although the Bible doesn't explicitly state it as such. Ellen White does. It's dealing with this concept that we are two parts. We are physical and we are non-physical. And it's an extremely complex relationship between the two. There are many feedback mechanisms in both directions. So the studies that have currently been set out in the movement address this subject here. And if we were to use a singular word to help us fix the concepts that we want to understand when it comes to this subject, the one word that I would ask you to put into your brains when it comes to study 1, glory 1, is will, or what we might call willpower. So I'll call it the will, so we understand the context. It's a noun. So it's the will. That's what you need to understand about this whole first series on the nature of man. Ellen White speaks about the true force of the will. Now people have gone away with that study thinking, okay, now I've got all the tools to deal with my sin problem. It's all about the will. But the problem is that's only half the story. And even that part of that half story, there are many complexities there. It's not that easy to define how a human being operates and how they're constructed. But we want to try and keep it simple so it's workable, so it's useful. If you make something too complicated, it's not useful, it doesn't help us. And the point of all of these studies is to simplify complex machinery, complex issues. So this is the study of the will. Are we okay with that? Yes? So there's a whole different study that needs to be done, which has not been done in the movement properly. I don't mean people are not aware of it, people haven't spoken about it in a health lecture perhaps, but as a prophetic subject, that work has not been done, and that is the literal resurrection, glory to, the human shell, the body, or what we might call the outer man. So the key word that I want us to think about in that, so we're doing things backwards, if you like. We're not even doing the study yet, and I'm already giving you all the framework and the key thoughts for whenever that work would be done by whomever it will be done. So this one was the will. Does anybody know the word that I want to put here? We have spoken about it, I think. Certainly spoke about it to people privately at this school. Anybody have a clue? Don't guess if you're not sure. I don't want to come up with the wrong answer if you're not sure. Okay? Habit. So, there are two things we need to consider when we discuss the human being. The will and the habit. Now, this is not a study on the habit. This study is not going to be done, but I'm pointing it out. This is the framework of what needs to be considered to do a complete study on the nature of a human being. And I think this was in private conversation. I can't remember if we did it in class. This study was all called The Nature of Man. Who is the man? Who is that man? What man was that? Not the description of it. What man was that? The inner man? Oh, with his name. Adam? Christ. So the point is, if it's your name, my name, Adam, Eve, or it all works the same. People have missed that point. So this is a generic title, man. If you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, what's the foundational logic that Paul is going to use to develop his argument? Brother Rogers, what's his foundational argument that he's going to use? Sorry? And? Adam 1 and Adam 2. And what's the difference? There's no difference. That's the point. He can use them interchangeably. We know that because what is their names? Adam. He's changed the name of Christ to Adam, Adam 2. Now there are some compares and there are some contrasts. but essentially they're the same person. So this could equally have been called the nature of Christ. And that becomes significant because the church does not understand the humanity of Christ, what it looks like, how it's put together. Why did we even look at all of that? Sister Emma, why did we look at that? Besides Deuteronomy bringing this issue to us, besides the issue of good advice, like it says in Deuteronomy, be nice. And I say, well, I don't want to be nice. And then what's the punishment going to be? You can't punish somebody for not being nice, can you? Because you don't even know what nice means. Why did we look at it besides that issue? What's confronting the movement today? That ugly or beautiful word, depending on how one's viewpoint is. You are sure, but you just can't remember. It's okay. Anyone else? Sister Emma? How we approach the vows, those 4 vows. This is the subject or the conflict between 2 world views, apparently. The conservatives and the liberals. Liberalism. What can we wear? How are we supposed to dress? Today, we're in a brand new dispensation. So, Ellen White said, in her dispensation, you're not allowed to eat fish. Can we eat fish today in our dispensation? Brother Benjamin? No? Why not? We've got this perspective that we've misread everything. It was a law in the past, and now it's only good advice. You don't have to take the advice, do you? Why is it all suddenly, in the minds of certain people, okay to do that, and you say it's not okay? Sorry? Because it has an effect on glory 2, and glory 2 has a feedback mechanism to glory 1. And glory 1, how do you get this new heart? What does it mean to have a new heart? What does it mean if you have a new heart? There are various ways to express it. We always want to remember, whatever our subject is, almost on any issue, there are various ways to approach or to conceptualize the subject at hand. We did that with the first angel, remember? We did that with the third angel. Many ways to see it. Some more, some less. So what is a new heart? How does that work? A sanctified life. One answer, sanctified life. Another way to see it. You can give me Bible verses, just give me the concept. Just be quick. This is a passing point I want to make. Change of habits. Not change of habits. It's too far along the road. Just simple ones. It's technically correct, it has to be. Better understanding of truth. How can you better understand the truth? Where does the truth need to be for you to better understand it? It needs to be far away or next to you? next to you. That sounds like a parable. You got the truth and you did what to it? What did you do with the truth? You threw it next to the person, and now it stands next to you, and now you can do what? Check the truth because it's next to you. And what are you going to do? Compare yourself to the truth. So the truth needs to be next to you, but so not literally next to you. Where does it actually need to be? In your heart. Why? What did you say before? You said it.
I said better understanding what is happening.
Understand. He used the word understand. The only way you can understand the truth if the truth is next to you. If it's far away, you can't see it. To understand truth, what do you need to understand? You're going to compare two things. What are you going to compare? Truth and yourself. You cannot compare the truth and yourself when they're far apart. So you bring the truth next to you. Yeah? The definition of parable is to throw something near. We should all we should all know that Greek definition of parable. Hopefully we do. To throw near. The purpose is so that you can compare. So where does understanding reside? We'll just say here in the heart. So you need the law in your heart. We'll call it the truth. When it's there in your heart, now you can begin to have an understanding of what is happening. And it's a compare and contrast between your actions and the truth. You could say the law. So it needs to reside in your heart. That's a classic definition of a new heart, isn't it? I will write my laws in their heart. It's a new covenant. Yes? The new deal. The new agreement. Is that the end of the new agreement? No, that's part one of the new agreement. What's part two of the new agreement? New bodies. In the time of Christ, they've got this backwards. What did they want? They want new bodies. They want glory too. They want all this visible stuff without this. They want to skip this. One more approach, one more perspective of what this new heart looks like. We've done two so far. What are the two we just did? The law in your heart, that's the classic one. The first one we had was sanctification. One more. Can't remember the page. But it's found in an Adventist home, I think. Pretty sure it's Adventist home. This is all about the study that was done here on Glory 1. What's the problem when you're going to deal with this issue? It's on the board. What's the problem? The will. Is there a problem with the will? Brother Rogers, is there a problem with the will? No problem with the will. What's the problem? Sorry? I can't hear. The problem is exercising the will. Exercising it. Exercise doesn't mean strengthening it. It means to put it put it to work. What's preventing us from doing that? What's preventing the will from being exercised? Sorry? The lower passions. So there's the clue. What's this? Lower passions, that's the clue I've just given you. What's the problem? We all know if we watch the studies. This is his reminder. Govern. The lower powers are governing. Is that enough clue? What is this? How does it happen? The lower powers, where do they live? They live in the body, but specifically here. They live here. What needs to happen to them? What are they doing when they're there? She used the word governing. Who governs? Is it a committee? No, not who governs lower powers. Who governs? There's three forms of government, basically. What are the three forms of government? Monarchy? Democracy? No, a monarchy is a dictatorship. So these lower powers, are they in some kind of committee? Is there a committee? No, there isn't. They work by themselves. They rule, they govern.
I want to suggest that quotation for that. It's at 27.
1
27
says what?
says that the lower
Paraphrase.
so it's that the lower power is in the have their seat in the body.
There it is. Adventist Home 127. I was good. I thought it was 121. That's what. So, and I wasn't sure. That's why I didn't say 127. It was one of the passages that we brought up frequently. They have their seat here. The seat is the same seat that's found in Revelation 13, verse 3, 2. Revelation 13, verse 2. Gave him power, seat, and great authority. Seat is a what? A throne. Where who sits? King. Another word for king? Dictator. He runs everything, or she does. They rule. So there's this seat here. What happens when you have a new heart? What happens to that seat? Does it? Does the seat, who said it changes? Who said it changes? Okay. Does the seat change? Does the seat change? You shout loud. Does the seat change? Does the seat change? Pagan Rome moves from the city of Rome to where? Don't help her. Constantine. When he moved from there, from Rome to Constantine, did he leave his seat in Rome? Yeah? What else did he leave in Rome besides his seat? Sorry? His throne. Is that what you said? The seat is the throne. What else did he leave? What makes a seat a throne? You've got to shout, my sister. What gives you the visible authority to govern? How do you know who's governing if you looked around? What's the visible symbol of governance? What's the visible thing that you can see if you know someone's a king? How do you know who a king is? What do you see to know someone's a king? My sister? How do you know someone's a king? Yeah. They wear a crown. What makes a seat a throne? My sister? What makes a seat a throne? What makes a seat a throne? What turns a normal seat into a throne? You gave me the answer. You just gave me the answer. A crown? A crown. So when when pagan Rome leaves the city of Rome, did it take its seat with it? No. What did it leave? The seat. What seat is that? Say, throne. If it's the throne, what was left with the seat? The crown. What does it say on that crown? What title did it have? What did it say on that crown? Tells you whose crown it is, doesn't it? Like a label. And what did it say on the crown then? This crown belongs to... Sorry? King of the North. So it says KN, King of the North. Did it get left there or did it get taken to Constantinople? It got left there. And someone came to pick it up. Who was that? Who picked up the crown and sat on the chair? My brother? Not sure the question. Repeat the question. No, not enough time. Someone else who knows the answer. Who picked up the throne, the crown? The papacy did. The Pope says, I'll take my hat off, put this hat on, or put it on top of my hat, so I can wear a double hat, and sit on the chair. So here it is, the chair's here, it's a throne, it doesn't get taken away, it stays there. Does the crown remain? Yes. Someone's going to get kicked out. Who gets kicked out of here? Lower powers. Who sits on the seat and puts the crown on? No. Christ does. Christ comes and does that. We okay? Okay, so there's various ways of looking at this. If Christ sits on the throne and he says, I'm not sharing this throne with anybody, what does he become? Dictator. I don't know why we think dictatorship is an ugly word. Okay? So, Ellen White says, what about habits? What's this famous quote Ellen White talks about habits? What does she say? Who knows? Rough approximation. No? Is this Jackie? You can paraphrase. When you do something a lot, frequently, it becomes, you repeat something often and it becomes a habit, and then habits become character. Okay, so that's the Spirit of Prophecy quote. Someone can find the reference for those who aren't familiar with it. So, repeated actions become habit, and habit become character. And character is what? Character is what? The answer is on the board. Character is what? Someone said? Glory 1 or glory 2? Can you touch that? Yeah? Can you touch character? Okay, so I don't want glory 1 to be the answer. Character is what? I asked the question a few moments ago. I said, give me the various descriptions of this thing. What were the various descriptions that we had? Sanctification. The law in the heart. Law in the heart. In the moment. Sorry? Christ on the throne. We looked at it 3 ways. The same issue. Are we okay? Now my question is, acts turn into habits, habits turn into character. And what does that point to? Character? Sorry? Heart. It's right here. It's the same issue. Character is what? Classic definition. Thoughts and feelings makes moral character. Where are thoughts and feelings? Where do they live? Right here. So if you're going to say habits and do this in its positive sense, you get this big feedback mechanism that comes right back to here. It's the new heart. The reference, my brother? Sorry? CHL. That sounds like page. Someone can just give a different reference for that. CHL. That's an obscure one. We'll find it in the more regular one. CHL is. What's the title? Sorry? Christian leadership. So it'll be lowercase h. That's a devotional. We'll find it in its original reference. So, any questions on that? People are already nervous because we're saying Deuteronomy, all these rules, some are laws, some are good advice. So, when we start talking about laws and good advice, who is the judge on these matters, these issues? Always give you a choice. Two choices are you and God. You and God. So we start talking about law, who's the judge? What did you say? And what do people say here? God. Okay, when someone kills someone in the book of Deuteronomy, who sorts out the mess? Where does the murderer have to go? To the sanctuary city. And it's within a day's march wherever you live in the land. Why does he go there? Or she? Quickly, why did they go there? Sister Emma? So they don't get killed. So they have a sanctuary protection until what happens? Sister Emma? Until their case is brought up by the judges and they work out what's gone wrong. So it's all about human people. We okay with that? You go all the judgment, all the law issues are all about humans. So when we start talking about good advice, what we've done is the following. We say, okay, don't eat eggs. They're very bad. In fact, eggs are really bad for you. We should not be eating eggs. But if you eat an egg, I saw my brother over there sneaking an egg the other day, cooking it up. He ate it and no one saw, but I noticed that he was eating it. What's going to happen to the person? God's going to look down and he says, look at that wickedness he did at this school. He ate an egg. We have to deal with that problem, don't we? Because we're not supposed to eat eggs with 144,000. So what's going to happen? We can't kill the person, can we? So who's going to kill the person for eating the egg? God. When? When? In the last day. We'll go with the last days. Sometime in the future, he's going to kill the person for eating an egg. That's how we process it. Because we turn everything into law. Someone has to die. Now, should we be doing that? Is that a good methodology? No. What's the methodology that we should be using? One word. Begins with P. The king of the north and the king of the south do it all the time. Not practice. Where are they all fighting? They don't like fighting in their own country. Proxy. Everything's proxy. If the law and the judgment of sin is proxy. Do we agree with that? It's all proxy. The book of Deuteronomy, you check, it's all proxy. Why do we turn the good advice into something that's not proxy? Because you and I know we can't touch anybody for eating an egg. So we say, God will sort that out. It's the same mess, the same problem that we do in which book, which chapter? Daniel, chapter 2. What do Adventists do with that chapter, Brother Rogers? They say the mountain is heaven and the statue is earth. They don't understand how to compare and contrast. Could you do that? Does it even work? Heaven and earth. No. Why won't it not work, Sister Snyder? What's the problem? They're too far apart. How do you fix the problem? What does Jesus have to do? He has to come here to become one of us, to come next to us. That's one of the primary reasons, the theological reasons why he has to, because you can't fix the problem from a distance. So you know conceptually that it's wrong. So we're left with a problem about this good advice issue. You can't enforce it. So if you can't enforce it, then it becomes, I've chosen the term to say good advice. And therefore you can do it. And you're going to find almost all of those reform issues all fall into that category. And so people are going to say, it's only good advice, we can do what we want. And we're going to say, because we're all conservatives, are we all conservatives in this school? Are we all conservatives? My elder, are you a conservative? Yes or no? Or are you liberal? Okay, so my elder's a liberal, but he's in the midst of us, so he can't show his colours. He has to say he's a conservative. Is that what you're doing, Brother Benjamin? Are you a liberal at heart, but you have to give the conservative view? So we all... Which one? You're not even sure what you are. Brother Wilson. What are you, conservative or liberal? You're liberal. Anyone else? Conservatives. He said that with pride. It's bad to be a conservative. You're in the middle. So according to Revelation 3, you're... Sorry, no, he meant he's balanced. That's what he meant. Balanced. Don't be extreme. Okay? So, this issue has confronted this movement because we don't even understand what liberalism is and what conservatism is. It's degenerated to what? Eggs. And your clothes. That's how we're defining that. And is that what we're supposed to do? No. Where did we take all that idea from? Straight from the world. There are too many of us who have looked at the world for so long, we've become worldly. And we want to cloak that worldliness and call it liberalism. The problem is, worldliness isn't even liberalism today. It's something else. We've already defined that. So, when this movement started talking about liberalism and unlocked the padlock, took it off and opened the box and all this stuff came out, What came out? Did a pair of earrings fall out? And you say, oh, these look nice. Let's put them on. Or, oh, this looks good. Lipstick. It was locked in the box for so long I've been missing it. Is that what came out of that box? No, what came out of the box? It was a pair of ladies' trousers came out of that box, and we became confused. Because when you look for the trousers, what do you want with it? Pair of earrings and some lipstick. We thought that's the package deal. What else came out of that box? A nice certificate that says what? Sister X No. Yeah, I'll do it. I have to do it this way because it wouldn't work. Is an elder. So we started getting certificates out. That's what came out of that box. That's what liberalism is. It's not about these 4 issues of how you eat and how you dress and where you live. That's not what the issue of liberalism is that we're confronting in this movement. We seem confused on this issue. If you go back and check, so I'm going to take a leap of faith. Hopefully you can jump with me. When we talk about liberalism, I want to frame it in a certain way. So like I did here, the will, the habit, I want us to take a key thought and hold on to that and use that as our anchor or our framework of the subject. So liberalism is about how you treat other people. That's what liberalism is. Liberalism, other people. You go to those 4 vows that people are attacking now in the name of liberalism, and what's the common thread through all of those 4, my brother? Yeah, what connects those 4 vows?
What about your lifestyle?
About whose lifestyle?
Yourself.
Yourself. So liberalism is about selflessness, other selves, and these 4 vows are about self. So what we've done is changed a selfless message into a selfish message. And mixing the two has caused this fanaticism that has entered into our movement. And the reason it's got in is because people have mistakenly, I'll say in an ugly way, they've deceived the movement in the name of methodology. So the fanaticism has entered into the movement through the disguise of methodology, and it's not methodology, it's utter selfishness. And I don't mean in an ugly way, selfishness. I'm not trying to say you're so selfish you don't care about other people. I'm not using it that way. But it's all about the self. But these changes that have happened, if we can call it the Midnight Cry message, were never about yourself. They're about other people. So it's not selfless like you don't care about people. It's not about that. Anyway, I'm not using selfish and selfless in that moralistic framework that we tend to. But it really is about how you conceptualize your relationship with other people. How do you see them? The tools that we were given, the primary one, were a pair of female trousers. And when that happened, things started to go wrong. Because people expect a whole outfit to come out if you're going to do that. But what they missed, if people want to start talking about methodology, is not to say what's associated with a pair of female trousers, which is liberal, earrings, makeup, all the adornments that are attached with it. It's not that. The methodology is about thinking of others and not thinking about yourself. Should we be thinking about ourselves? Should we be selfish? Of course we have to. Where do we see it? What's the key word? Selfish is, on the board, what's the key word? Selfish is, someone said? Here it is. Habit. Why is that so important? Because acts turn into habits, habits turn into character, character are thoughts and feelings, and thoughts and feelings are the new heart. It's critical that we understand what habits are. And if anyone's tried it, eggs are addictive. They're addictive on many levels. The protein profile of eggs, in fact many meat products, do you understand that a profile of the protein profile of a food, the amino acids, you know, we talk about 8 essential amino acids, there's more than 8, but they have a profile. Beans have a certain profile. We'd call it a pattern. So if this was a line and these are all the proteins, they have a pattern. Does that make sense? A profile. Animal products have a different profile. And the profile, we'll just talk about eggs, the profile of those proteins, when they enter into your body, they become addictive. There's certain amino acids in there that we like. Our body responds to in a certain way that it doesn't respond to in the same way with the amino acid profile of, say, rice. There's differences. And so eggs become addictive at a number of levels, at a chemical level, at a hormonal level, just at a taste level. And even though eating eggs are good advice, you can't enforce that. I want to say, you can't say, oh, don't worry, God will kill you at the end for eating the eggs, because he's the judge. You break the rules of proxy or parables. The people who are the judges are us. And we can't judge someone for eating eggs, can we? No. So it comes into this area here about habit. You eat eggs a lot, it turns into a habit, becomes an addiction, if we want to call it that. It changes your character, which are your thoughts and feelings, and they begin to affect you here. And this is why Ellen White says, if you eat meat, you will become animalized. If you've heard that phrase, I think that's the word she used. It will animalize you. And that is super spiritualistic. If you think about that. Because what you're saying is, if you're not careful, you take on the spirit of the cow. Cow had a spirit, you take on that spirit. It's not that mechanism, which is a new age understanding. And I'm not saying it's some kind of evil understanding. It's a new age or a false religion's conception of a truth. The act, you eat the cow. You do it often enough, it becomes a habit. It changes your character, your thoughts and feelings. They begin to be changed at a heart level, which is all spiritual. So that animalization of a human body, because they continue to eat animal products, is a real life phenomena. But it's not that the cow had some spirit to it, and you're eating the spirit of the cow. That's a new age concept. That's the concept of cannibalism, by the way. Cannibalists don't eat human bodies because they're hungry. They've got plenty of food. in their cultures. They're not starving to death. They didn't have a plane crash in the Antarctic and all you've got left is your neighbour and you eat them. That is not cannibalism. In the same way that looking at dispensations is not dispensationalism. Dispensationalism is a doctrine. Cannibalism is a doctrine. When you're a cannibal, you eat the brain of your enemy or a portion of their body. It's normally part of their brain. The reason is because you want to take their spirit. Yeah? And you wouldn't eat the brain of the weak person. You eat the brain of the who? The 1397 person. Because you want to be like that. Okay, so the reason why this becomes significant is we have misunderstood our relationship to the vows, particularly the 4 vows which deal with reform. If we can do it this way, the 4 ones are here, the 22 are here. If we can just do it that, I think you could express it that way. So even if it's good advice and it's not enforceable, the problem arises here. You have this problem and Jesus says what? If you do all these wrong things, you're going to have bad thoughts and bad feelings, which means who's sitting there? The lower powers are sitting there, which means he won't sit there. So there's this dictatorship model that is inbuilt into this issue about those 4 vows. So to simply put, because I don't want to keep on going on and on about this, the vows are still intact. They've been assailed, but they still have integrity. Those issues about modesty, which become which you can't enforce because no one even knows what modesty even means. Who knows what modesty means? How can you tell? Modesty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm wearing a pair of modest earrings. And I say, they don't look modest to me. You say, well, compare it to these big hoops someone else is wearing. They look pretty modest. I say, yeah, they don't look as bad as that. So everybody knows there's degrees of immodesty, but it's not definable. So, any questions on that? Because I want to move on.
I need some clarification on the statement I made here. You say that we should be selfish in habit. How should we be selfish in habit?
Okay, when I use the word selfish, I want us to remember that I didn't use it in a moralistic framework that it's evil to be selfish. I didn't mean it that way. Habits are all about yourself. It's all about looking after number one. And I'm not saying we're not supposed to do that. We're required to do that. You're required to look after yourself. You're required to be selfish. Of course you are, otherwise you wouldn't function. So I didn't want us to see selfish and selfless. Like I say, you people are being so selfish, not caring about other people. This is that framework that people used before. Sisters are so selfish, they wear miniskirts, don't appreciate the pain that the brothers were put through. It's not that. That's not what we're speaking about. We're speaking about selfish here. We're talking about taking care of ourselves. We're supposed to take care of ourselves. We're supposed to be selfish. But this was a study. This Midnight Cry message was about looking out for other people. If you want to think about it this way, you're here and this person's here. They're far away, so you can't check them. You bring them close to yourself and you check them, and what do you find? There's disparity. And what are you required to do when there's disparity? You're required to bring them up to be your equal. That's essentially what the Midnight Cry message is about. It's not about, can I wear this, or can I now live this way, or can I make some changes to the rules and regulations of my dietary or living arrangements. That was not what the Midnight Cry message was about. It became confusing because the symbol of that seemed to be attached to those 4 vows. Dress.
Okay, we have seen this attack of the vows, the 4 vows. And can we go to historically and argue about these teachings of Nicolaitans, or is it the same? Can it fall in the same category?
I don't think so. I think the people, I don't want to read into people's heart because I don't have the ability to do that. I don't know why they're doing this. I'm not saying it's not an objective study. I'm not trying to infer that the only people who are talking about this are all the people who secretly love eggs. And this is their excuse. They found an argument to eat that. I'm not suggesting that. So I don't want to go down that route to say that essentially that they're going to be bad people. If this is just a doctrinal study, I think it's not the right methodology. That's the level that I want to leave it at. And it's funny, when a person says something, sometimes you don't realise what they're saying. I wouldn't want to use the word attack. People are not attacking those vows, but I suspect I probably have said that in the course of this conversation. And I don't want to mean it in the sense that people have a hatred toward these things, that they don't see common sense in following a vegan diet or living sensibly in a decent location. Someone else had their hand up.
I wanted to ask, is a baby born with a new heart, a newborn baby?
No, they're not born with a new heart. So is that enough answer, or do you want more? When babies are born, Jesus is not the king of their heart.
So it's a sinful heart.
No. Sinful means full of sin. And a baby hasn't formed any thoughts or feelings. They work at a subconscious or hormonal or chemical level. Most of it's automatic. They don't process things. They don't do what you do, say, oh, stop the conversation, I want to go toilet. They don't have a consciousness of that, they just go toilet. They don't say, I'm feeling cold, I need to put something on. They have no ability to do that, to function properly. So they don't have a sinful heart in the way you and I do. It's not packed with sin. It's empty. It's a clean sheet of paper that needs to be written upon. And they need help to make sure that the writing, what goes on there, their testimony, their biography, is a good one. And most of the time, parents do a really bad job. In rare circumstances, they do a good job. Sometimes those hearts are already not the right shape. They're deformed in some way. So it becomes very difficult, even for a good parent, to write a good testimony on that heart. Children are born with certain tendencies or bents, but it's neutral when they're born. It fills up pretty quick. It doesn't take that long. But they certainly they're not born with a new heart. Someone over here? Someone had their hand up? Who had their hand up before that? No? Okay, Brother Wilson.
Yeah, let's say that if you can provide a verse or a spirit of prophet's quotation about the new heart, and I've got one from the message to young people, and speaking about the new heart.
Did someone find a better reference for this? MYP 72? 72.1. Go ahead. Read loud.
It says, when Jesus speaks of the new heart, he means the mind, their life, their whole being. To have a change of heart is to withdraw from their affection from the world and fasten them upon Christ. To have a new heart is to have a new mind, new purposes, new motives. What is the sign of the new heart? A changed life. There is a daily, hourly dying of selfishness and pride.
So I like that quote. It explains, I think, what we've spoken about. The quote is intact, but what I would like to do is just take out the last two words that was used there, which was selfishness and pride, because I didn't want to have this discussion and put a label on my brothers and sisters who are struggling with this issue and say that they're selfish and prideful, because I don't believe that they are. But the quote is intact. Obviously, I'm not trying to wrestle the quote, but I wouldn't want to use that as a proof text to say that Brother Wilson and I are saying, if you are eating eggs, you're prideful and selfish. That wasn't what the purpose of this study was about, and that's not the purpose of why he found that verse. It was the bits that came before it. It was more about the mechanism or the theology or the methodology of how this is working. It's not that you're selfish. So if you could just read it again, leave the selfishness and the pride out, because I want us to see the mechanism and the feedback loops that she's talking about, which I think are in complete agreement. No, we're in complete agreement with what she's saying. Thank you. Please.
Say, when Jesus speaks of the new heart, he means the mind, the life, the whole being. To have a change of heart is to withdraw the affection from the world and fasten them upon Christ. To have a new heart is to have a new mind, new purposes, new motives. What is the sign of the new heart? A changed life.
Thank you. So I think that's in complete agreement, without taking the verse and breaking it down and proving and showing you that it would. Hopefully you can see glimmers of it. Over this side, someone had any comments? Question?
Based on that question of the neutral act of a child, in case of the death, what's the qualification of that destiny?
I didn't understand your question. A child dies.
Only qualification of the destiny. Do we go to hell or heaven?
It depends on the record, doesn't it? They will check the record of what happened to that child. It's life. It's a fair question, but I didn't want to go down that route. What the problem that happens is, what have we added here? What's the important word on this line, on that sentence? In relation to his question, what's the rule one? Here, what is it? 20 years. The problem with the baby is they're not accountable. They're not accountable on multiple levels. One of them is a hormonal, chemical level. Their brain development has not occurred. So whatever they did, they're not even accountable for that. So you can get a baby that you say, oh, that's a selfish baby, because every time it's hungry, it demands something. It says, feed me, I'm the center of attention. Pure selfishness. So you could write on the record, this is a selfish child, which would mean they don't go to heaven if you're going to use that. So it's not a simplistic way to approach the subject when you start talking about young babies, when you go to that extreme, because there's no way for us to assess the issue of accountability. If you want to do it at a simple level, they're not accountable for their wrong deeds. So if they're not accountable, it's not held against them. They don't know the difference between good and evil, so therefore they will be going to heaven if you're going to do it that way. So that's, I think, the approach would be if you wanted to do that. Elder Tess. Sorry? I can't hear you. I know she had her hand up. I just wanted to do the ones on this side because all the questions have come from this side. Did that answer your question? It's Monica. I can't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry. Yours is concerning adornment. What's your question? Sorry, I said. I don't think I want to say it like I'm saying it's an attack. I don't think I want to frame it that way. So is your question about the plaiting of hair? So if you're going to approach this problem and we're going to say plaiting of hair. So is there one standard form of plaiting? Is there one form of plaiting? No. Is there one reason to plait? No. So the problem is it becomes an unmanageable subject which puts it into the category of good advice, not law. And if that's the case and it fits here, you do it long enough, it becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, it changes your character. So if someone is adorning themselves or doing anything that those vows discuss, it affects them for good or for bad. So if people want to adorn themselves and if they want to plait or jewelry or any issue, the end result of all of that is it will affect the heart. So if a person is plaiting their hair to keep it tidy, to have from their perspective, they have a legitimate reason to do that, that's up to them. If they don't have a legitimate reason to do that, that it's basically the glorification of the human body, then it will begin to affect them right here at the heart level. So the problem with all of this issue is that we're not comfortable for people to self-manage. So it becomes an issue of self-management or self-determination. And the problem that any organisation is going to be confronted with is how do people have self-determination on these issues compared to what the standard that this body or God would have us follow. People see a contradiction in that. I don't think I see a contradiction in that. So I like to work on simple models that people can have a feel for. So I want to just go for the subject of eggs. So God says we shouldn't eat eggs. The vow reflects that. It says don't eat eggs. That's good advice. If you eat eggs, it will harm you. It will harm you on multiple levels. It will harm you on the physical level, and it's going to harm you on the spiritual level because of this feedback, we can say. We don't even understand our relationship to food, when we eat, how we eat, what we eat. It's so complicated. No human being understands that. We just follow the basic rules. So the question is, why would we want to do something that is damaging? God says don't do it. It's not going to be good for you. So his church, his body, in agreement with his direction says don't do that. So if an individual says, well, I don't care what you say, which means I don't care what God says, I want to do it anyway, they choose not to take heed to the advice. And it's up to them to work out the consequences of that. Now, that has just been framed in a rebellious perspective, hasn't it? The way I just said that. I just said, person, I don't care what the church says, I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah? So, I'm going to say the same thing. There's these parents and their crops have failed. They live in the middle of nowhere and they've got some chickens who have survived and they're going to say, Lord, I don't care what the church says. My child is going to die. I have to feed them eggs and I have to eat them myself. Is that rebellion? No, we wouldn't consider that to be rebellion, but the act is the same. The act is the same. The physical damage will be the same. The physical damage will be the same. And I will venture to say the damage to the heart will also be the same. And I don't mean that from the perspective of one was rebellious and one was forced into the situation. There's a chemical reaction that occurs at multiple levels that affects our spirituality. It's not the fact that you eat meat or you don't eat meat. No, you eat meat for rebellion or you eat meat for good reasons. It will still affect your heart. It animalizes you whether you like it or not. Eggs will do the same. So I don't want to put it into the framework of people doing things that are rebellious. So if you want to come back to the subject of plaiting of hair, or braiding, as some people might call it, the council says that we should not braid our hair. So if a person says, I don't care what God says, I want to look beautiful, and in my definition, braiding makes me look beautiful, I'm going to do it anyway. They're going to go through all of this and they're going to get into trouble. If another person says, yeah, what I have to do to my hair is functionally necessary, becomes a functional matter. Functional means necessary in order that my hair doesn't get wrecked or destroyed. It needs to be managed and taken care of, treated respectfully. So there are numerous sisters who will plait or braid their hair to respect their hair, to treat it properly, which is why they will use shampoos and conditioners to take care of it, because we're supposed to take care of our bodies. So it's now about stewardship. So how do I know why someone is doing something? Is it stewardship or is it vanity? The advice is that we shouldn't do that. If a person comes to the place where they say braiding is the right thing for me because I have a certain hair situation, they're free to do that. There's no problem in people braiding their hair or not braiding their hair. When I say people, we're talking exclusively about sisters. It's about the motivation. So we could have a discussion on hair braiding, but I've found, in my experience, it never ends up going anywhere. And the reason it never goes anywhere, when I've had discussions with sisters, is because the one thing that they tell me all the time is I don't understand. I don't understand about the necessities or the dynamics of hair braiding. So I've got to the place where I actually say, you're right, I don't understand. It actually is none of my business because I'm not a woman who has to deal with this issue. If I was, I'd probably have a better feel to it and I could probably give more meaningful input on the subject. But because I don't, I take the word of my sisters. And my sisters, the ones that I've spoken to over this issue, over decades, the consistent story is, you just don't understand how our hair works. And I say, I don't think I do. So I think it's better for you to self-manage the situation And if you need to braid your hair or plait it, or however a person calls that, then go ahead and do that. There's no problem. The advice that's being given is the advice to not have vanity. That's what that good advice is. If you're doing it for vanity, you're going to end up getting hurt here at a spiritual level. But if someone's not wearing it for vanity reasons, there's not going to be any damage for them. And who am I to know which of the two it is? So it falls into this realm of good advice, and people need to allow everyone to exercise their own judgment on that subject. Often in the discussion, when these things come up, people want someone like myself, the speaker, or a leader in some form, to pronounce a judgment. It can or it cannot be done. And I don't think I want to, I don't think I'm allowed to, and I don't think I have the ability to. And so when someone wants to comment and say, well, what's your opinion on this? My opinion is, it's good advice not to be vain. If a person's sure it's not vanity, there's no problems. If a person believes the reason they're doing this is for vanity, or they're a slave to fashion, maybe they want to reconsider what they're doing. Maybe they want to take the braids and the plaiting out, if that's what their motivation is. Because it affects this heart at a really serious level. That's what those vows are trying to teach. They're dealing with a very narrow subject, and some of them, in fact most of them, have two facets. Is it evil to eat eggs? Are eggs evil? We can't say that. Far too many medical missionaries will tell you cow's milk is a poison. I don't know how many of us believe that, but it's craziness, in my opinion. It's crazy to treat a food product as a poison, like meat or eggs or cheese or any of those things. They're not poisons. You can eat them and you can survive, but they come with a price. It's the same with anything that we do that we would call adornment. Is plastic surgery evil and bad? It depends, doesn't it? It depends. If a man, perfectly normal man, has a perfectly reasonable body, but he looks at the body and doesn't like what it looks like, and he says, I'm going to go to a plastic surgeon and I'm going to get some implants into my biceps to make them look bigger, or in my chest to puff myself up. Is plastic surgery good or bad? In that context, it's bad. Now, if someone gets burnt and their face is scarred and they receive plastic surgery, is that bad? Isn't it? Is it not vanity if you say, well, you've got a big scar, it's not a problem, live with it? Why do we say, oh, it's not vanity to have plastic surgery? Why did you say it's not vanity? All it is a scar on their face, damaged tissue. Why can't you say, oh, it's not a problem? Why are you saying it's not vanity? They care about what they look like, don't they? Isn't that like almost a definition of vanity? So why do we say it's not vanity? Because we realize, scientifically, medically, even on a religious level, we understand that if someone is disfigured, even though they can't even see their face. And if I had a big scar here, I can't even see my face. Let's look in the mirror. So why am I even bothered? The reason why we're bothered is because it affects us. It affects us on a level that comes right down to here. The world recognizes it. Christians should recognize it. And I think all of you do. That if a person was damaged that way, you would say, sure, spend $10,000 and get plastic surgery and fix your face so that you can look, what I would say, normal, the average, as best as you can in society. We would say, well, that would be a waste of money. It wouldn't, because it affects you. It affects your inner being. There's this feedback. So when we start talking about makeup, is makeup evil? It would depend. Because there's just pure vain makeup, but there's plenty of makeup which I will say is used for medicinal purposes or medical reasons that would cover or hide someone's deformities. Yeah? Teeth. People lose teeth. Is it wrong to get a false tooth put in? Isn't that vanity? Or is it functional? Some of these issues are not that straightforward to deal with. So that's why it becomes problematic. It has to be left to the individual at its most basic level for them to decide why they're doing things. There are some cases where it's obvious why someone is doing something. And in that situation, when they stand in opposition to what the vow teaches, the church has the ability to make a judgment on that issue because it's so clear what the motivation is. And then it comes from the realm, moves away from good advice to law. But it's very infrequent and it's not that easy to deal with. It's a complex subject. We could talk a lot about it. But the reason why I bring this up is to say that it's all connected to the subject of the nature of man, about the outer body. You can't just dismiss this subject under the guise of liberalism or wrong methodology. It's not that straightforward to deal with. Sister Monica, your question was about jewellery and braiding. What was behind your question? Why were you asking the question? What's your concern? The example of your country. Is your country different to other countries? No, I'm just asking, from your observation, is your country different to other countries? We call it as a? Who's we when you said that? You said, according to the methodology, we. Who is the we that you're referring to? You, me, the Sudanese people, the world movement? Of your country. What's your position on all of that? Your understanding. So you're against plaiting.
Yeah, but my hair forced me to bleed, and I can still go back because in my country it is say it has no problem. So if it has no problem, even wearing, what I'm against is wearing my jewelry and other decorations. But I can still go back. But the reason why I decide is because of equality, because they are connected. If there is a way that can separate them, or they are not connected, then I can still go back and I maintain my hair according to how I want it.
So before, did you plait your hair?
No, I was not.
So why do you plait now?
Because there is freedom.
Why do you want to plait?
The reason,
Why do you want to plait the hair?
the reason why, because there is no condemnation.
No, why do you want to do it?
To be beauty.
Okay. Sorry? What's your position? Are you talking about braiding now or just generally? So people are now doing what they want and they say they can do it because of methodology. Is that wrong? There's no? But the problem with that argument is God doesn't tolerate women wearing trousers either. And God doesn't tolerate women in leadership positions. And God doesn't tolerate women being equal to men. God doesn't tolerate all of those three things in the spirit of prophecy. And we say, not only that in our history today, he does tolerate it and he didn't tolerate it. It's not, we can't just do that. I don't think we can just say it was tolerable then, that relationship between men and women, and now it's no longer acceptable. Now women can do all those things they couldn't do it before. I don't think it's as straightforward as dealing with it at that level. What we need to understand is why was it not acceptable then and why is it acceptable now? We need to have some models, some explanation of what the issue is. And I think many of us are missing that. We're missing why it was like that and why it isn't like that today. So when you say that it just says in the spirit of prophecy that this is not acceptable and therefore it is not acceptable, you have to take all of that with that perspective and you end up rejecting the midnight cry message. And so I think we have to look at it much more carefully. And as people are looking at it much more carefully, for sure we might make some mistakes, but we're also making a lot of progress and we're doing things that are not mistakes, that are correct. And I think we should acknowledge what we're doing correct as much as we should acknowledge what we're doing incorrect. So, when it comes to the issue of braiding, if someone says, oh, I'm going to do it for vanity, they need to realize what the scripture says about vanity. They need to make a position for themselves and say, vanity will not harm me. Now, who am I to say what the difference between looking smartly, when I say dressed, I mean the whole thing, looking respectful, like we do on Sabbath, and vanity, that people want to look beautiful because it makes them feel good to look beautiful, which really is vanity. It's not easy to work out the difference between the two as an outsider, and sometimes we're not even sure how we do it for ourselves. Why am I doing something? Is that I want to be tidy? I want to look respectful in front of you? Or do I really care what you think because I want people to like me? Or I want to look good? It can really easily degenerate into something that's bad. And that's what these vows are trying to bring forth. A principle that when you start going into these areas, and the problem is you can't avoid going into it because we live in that area, those 4 vows control our whole being. So when you're there, you need to know why you're doing things. And you need to know if you're doing things for a reason that's not good, it will affect you. In fact, even if you're doing something for a good reason, it will affect you. If you're hungry and you've got no other food and you eat eggs, will they damage your body? Yes. They'll damage it at a physical level and they'll damage it at a spiritual level. Even if you did it for a good reason, it will still damage you. Now, if you eat eggs for a wrong reason, the damage is even worse. Because then it begins to sear your conscience. And that's another area on this issue. When you're actually in rebellion, your conscience begins to get damaged. Now, eating eggs for a good reason will not damage your conscience. It will affect you in other ways. So there are degrees of harm. So when we start saying, so for instance, because the issue of braiding has come up, and now we're saying, oh, it's good advice. Just because something's good advice doesn't mean it's right to do it. It means it's not enforceable. And just because something is not enforceable does not mean it won't have consequences. So we've discussed that. The consequences are written there. So you know that Ellen White says that the 10 Commandments are like the law, the gold standard, if we could call it. And normally people would say health comes like down here. Good advice, if you like. What does Ellen White say? It's as sacred. And so when we say as sacred, or we go a little bit further and say equal, if you break the stealing commandment, what will happen? You die. So because the health laws have risen up so much, they're equal, they're as holy, we say, well, therefore, if you break that rule, what's going to happen? You die. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think you die because of those things. How do I know that's correct? You know, God says, thou shalt not kill. He doesn't say, you know what, you know what's happening? We're getting too many people in the world today, and they're living too long. So what happens is, when you get over the age of 80, what has to happen? We'll kill you. Population control. Does he do that? No. How does he control population? What does he tell you to do? Eat. He says, eat meat. Population control. That's what go and check. That's what it was for. It was population control. Meat eating was. That's why it was introduced. It was not introduced because they didn't have enough fruits and vegetables. It was introduced for population control. And the ultimate reason for that was what? Because God doesn't like lots of people getting old? No. It's because he knew the problem is here. When you live on this earth for 500 years, it is sickening. Not only your children lost, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, everyone around you is dying in rebellion, and you just want to die because you had enough. You hate the world. So in mercy, he says, eat meat. But he doesn't say, when you get to a certain age, kill the people. There's a distinction between the laws of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, and killing people with meat eating. It has differences. It doesn't have the same properties. So when we start talking about it's as holy, therefore the consequences are the same, it doesn't work that way. What God is identifying is, you eat meat, it will have consequences because you're breaking the law. What law are you breaking? The laws of nature. And laws, nature will bite back, if I can say it that way, yes? It will hurt you back, but it's not in the same way as the moral law. If I steal something, will nature attack me back? No, of course it won't. It's a completely different mechanism. God will intervene supernaturally to deal with that issue. So when we start elevating the health laws to the same status as the 10 Commandments, it's not to introduce that God kills you. It's to show you that there are consequences, there are laws that are set in place. Whether you eat meat for a good reason or a bad reason, it will affect you the same way. We're way over time, so I can't take any more questions.
I wanted to confirm the four vows. Is this one from 17 to 20?
Someone give us the numbers? 17 to 20. What you eat, what you dress, your leisure time, and where you live. Those are the four things that fundamentally control your life. That's what Adventism is expert on. We're so expert, it's just like the Sabbath. We became experts on the Sabbath. It became legalistic. And that's what we've done to those commandments. We've turned them into legal rules. And the problem is, when you give people freedom, they can abuse the freedom. And it becomes virtually impossible to police the issue. It becomes unpoliceable. In some unique, certain circumstances, you can police them when the rules are defined. And some of those issues are pretty well defined. Others are not. In fact, most of them are not out of those four vows. The multiple levels on them, because there's so much circumstantial issues that you have to deal with that it becomes unmanageable. So you just leave people to their own devices and say, go ahead and do what you want. So we'll have a rule: when you come to church, no eggs. Yeah? Is that a law or good advice? That's law. That's not good advice. You bring the eggs, they're not going to be accepted in our building and our table. We say, we don't want that. It's easily definable. It's either eggs or no eggs. Now we say, if you had eggs on Friday, you're not allowed to come to church. Is that enforceable? Of course not. You don't even know someone's doing it. It's good advice. So it really is subtle the more you think about it. So I wanted to keep the study simple. When you do a simple study, it opens up many questions. I understand that. So good advice looks dangerous. Looks like we can do what we want. You can't do what you want just because it's good advice. It will come back to hurt you if you don't follow the advice. And because it's not a legal system, it hurts you even worse because you don't even realize it's doing the damage. It's like when you eat bad food, it's corroding your system and you don't even know. 20 years later, you end up having cancer and you think, how did that happen? Okay. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. We want to ask and pray that as we deal with our own humanity, as we deal with the subjects that are presented before us in the book of Deuteronomy, that you would guide and direct us and bless us. These are issues that are confronting your movement at this very moment in time. Lord, help us to relate to your word in a correct and proper fashion. Lord, when you tell us to do something, help us to remember that you don't do that to waste your breath. That every instruction, every advice that you give us, every counsel is there for a purpose, to help us and to protect us. May we understand why you tell us to do something and why you tell us not to do something. We know that you want us to make intelligent decisions because they end up becoming the right decisions. Be with us and bless us on this preparation day, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.